Hey, it's Maximo and welcome back to Tipples'n'Treats. Today I've got something a little bit unusual. I've got a side-by-side comparison of two similar but quite different blended whiskies. This particular one is a Dewar's 8-year-old Portuguese Smooth whiskey, while this one is also a Dewar's 8-year-old Japanese Smooth whiskey. So join me on this side-by-side comparison of what should be a very interesting review. I was recently at my local Tipple superstore and I saw these two examples of blended whiskies on sale. And I thought, I've tried a few blended whiskies in the past and I've quite liked them. And these two, both on sale, I thought, I'm going to give them both a try. So they're both Dewars. They are both 700ml bottles. They're both 40% alcohol by volume. And both examples are blended whiskies. So this Japanese has been aged for 8 years. It's called the Japanese Smooth, and it's been aged in Mizunara oak casks. This particular bottle was $58.50 Australian on special, and that's around $40 US. It's usually around 65 Australian dollars full price. This example is an 8-year-old Portuguese Smooth. Both have been aged for 8 years and both have been double aged for extra smoothness. Now, this particular one has been finished in port casks, hence the reference to Portuguese, probably that Portuguese sherry that it's been aged in. So in terms of Dewar, John Dewar is the founder of the company, and he was one of the earliest pioneers of blended Scotch whisky, beginning his journey in the 1860s. And Dewar's, I was surprised to learn, also own Aberfeldy and Aultmore distilleries. And Aberfeldy in particular, I am planning a visit there when I go through Scotland, in the Speyside area of Scotland in a few months' time. So hopefully I'll be able to go to the distillery, and you can also book a tour of the Aberfeldy distillery, which is located in the Scottish Highlands. The Japanese Smooth, as I said, Mizunara oak casks, and apparently it gives it a delicious honey and floral note with warm spices and a dry finish, whereas the Portuguese, finished in port casks, it's rich and full-bodied, and it gives a unique finishing to the whiskey, which is creating a smooth, approachable and smooth whiskey with a difference. So there's only one way to find what these are like, and that is to open them. Quite like the boxes too. Very similar boxes, but this is obviously sort of a brownie box, and quite nicely embossed bottles, and with Japanese, is it katana, the writing there. Quite a nice stylish bottle. Let's see what the Portuguese one is like. A very similar bottle. It's got exactly the same embossing on it. the pork cask finish being what sort of stands out. So I think the top of the labels are quite similar, just the bottom label are quite different. Now, the aptitude test is opening these bottles, and quite fortunately for me, they are twist tops. That's one down. Now, twist tops, I think, probably save a bit of money, but it sort of, for me, signifies maybe a lesser quality spirit in the bottle with a twist top, because I think it's probably the cheaper way to seal these. Now, I'm just looking at these, and the Portuguese Smooth is quite a darker, richer toffee colour, whereas the Japanese is much lighter, more of a golden colour. Now, I'll just put these slightly to the side so I know what I'm drinking, and I'll reach for my tasting glasses. Oops, I nearly spilled that. Goodness. It would have been a very quick side-by-side comparison. What am I going to go for? I think I'm going to go for the Japanese first, because I think this might be a slightly lighter whiskey of the two. Not much of or there was no pop of the cork, because there was no cork involved, and the glug was somewhat disappointing. Hopefully the spirit will not be disappointing. Right, okay, let's get stuck into this. Be a bit of a challenge for me with the side-by-side comparison, but anyway, I'll give this a red hot go for you. Quite light and florally. A little bit sort of earthy. Maybe it's the oak coming through. Certainly fruits, summer fruits, perhaps pear, apple. Interesting. I might do everything side by side, so let's give this a bit of a pour. Now that's interesting. That was a slightly better glug, and the bottles are exactly the same shape, so I'm not sure. It must have been the angle that I was pouring. As I said, much darker, well, slightly darker colour. There's probably more volume in the bottle to make a difference. So this is the Portuguese. Sort of fruitier, maybe sweeter. Similar, but different. This is sort of a heavier, more sweet, perhaps sort of a more a caramel sort of hint. All right, interesting. Probably coming out of exactly the same blends of Scotch and just finished with different barrels. I think that's probably the main difference between the two. Let's get into these. Okay, now to taste. Sweet, quite creamy at the front of the palate, quite smooth. I'm getting maybe honey, vanilla, a little bit of spice. I'm definitely getting some woody notes as well. Interesting. not sure which I prefer in terms of the nose. I think the Japanese, perhaps. I am partial to a Japanese whiskey, by the way. Creamy, smooth, followed by spice. Quite warm notes. Reasonable finish. Slightly spicy or peppery. Sweet rather than astringent in the finish. All right. Now for the Portuguese. Yeah, I prefer the nose of the Japanese. But I think I prefer the taste of the Portuguese. That's also quite smooth. It's quite rich. It sort of has a dried fruit taste to it. Maybe like dried plums or overripe plums. Maybe a little bit of the sherry's coming through. It's certainly sweet and fruity. Quite warming. Quite different to the Japanese. I think that the Japanese is a lighter, fruitier, mellower whiskey, whereas this is, it's got a little bit more complexity, a little bit more depth. A little bit more caramel. There might even be a hint of smokiness, which could be the charred barrels. You just don't know. Out of the two, I think the Portuguese is for me, it's has the edge on the Japanese. Although if you were a novice drinker, I think the Japanese would be much more approachable, whereas this is a bit more complex and it's got sort of a deeper, more well-rounded palate to it. Okay, now let's try both of these with a little bit of ice and see what difference that makes. I've done a couple of side-by-side comparisons and I actually really enjoy it. The last one I did was I think the Bowmore from memory, and I think it was a 10-year-old versus a 15-year-old. It was quite interesting. All right, I think that's sufficient ice for both. Now let's release some of these soluble oils. And I've got the stereo stirring happening, folks. It's a lot more efficient doing 2 reviews in one. All right, let's start off with the Japanese, shall we? I think it's cut down the nose a bit. I'm getting sort of lighter florals. And maybe, I think a stronger woody, earthy hint of nose. Let's get into it. Oh, that's really nice. It's smooth, sweet, mellow, whatever spice there was has been dulled down quite significantly, and the finish I'm getting sort of quite a late sweet finish in terms of the aftertaste of this. Like, this is really nice. I think the ice has made a big difference to its mellowness. It doesn't sort of taste like a Scotch. It tastes more like a liqueur almost, with the sweetness. Interesting, isn't it? That's a really nicely balanced, nice flavour profile. It's what I would expect from a good blended Scotch whisky. It's not harsh, it won't offend anyone. It's nicely balanced. For how much was it? The Japanese? $58.50 on special. I think this is a lot better than some of the other single malts I've had for at least $20 or $30 more. Now, let's go for the Portuguese and see what a bit of ice has made to the taste profile of this one. Maybe it brought out the caramel. Maybe it's brought out a little bit of smokiness. It's very, very subtle, but interesting. Cheers. Smooth, creamy. Again, with the Japanese, it's sort of removed the spice almost entirely. I can't go back and take the ice out, but I think it was better as a neat. Interesting. Again, with the Japanese, it's very well balanced. It's approachable. There's nothing rugged about it. But out of the two, and I usually have my whiskies on the rocks, I think on balance the Japanese just might have the edge on this. I keep flipping between, one has a better nose, the other one it was better neat, and the other one is better with on the rocks. But at the end of the day, I generally always have my whiskies on the rocks, and this is the way that I would have it, and this is probably the way that I should judge the two on a comparative basis, I think. There's nothing to dislike. It's just a nice, sweet, unpretentious, good value for money, blended Scotch whisky. That you could drink all day, well, not all day, on an everyday basis. If you were drinking it all day, you'd, anyway, let's not go there. Moderation, people, moderation. Whereas the Portuguese, I think it's It's slightly more complex, but I think the finish is a bit more astringent and a bit more smoky. If I was to compare the two, I'd say I think the Japanese has the edge. This is nice. If you just only tried this, you'd say, oh, this is a very good 8-year-old blended whiskey. But on a side-by-side comparison, I think you've got to decide which one you prefer, and I think I prefer the Japanese. I think the Portuguese is a close second, but if I saw this on sale again, I think I'd go with the Japanese. It's probably a bit more lighter and more approachable than the Portuguese, which is a bit I don't know. I think the difference is in the finish. I think they'll prefer the lighter, sweeter finish of the Japanese to the more complex and slightly more astringent finish of the Portuguese. I think it's very close. It's hard to separate them really, and I'm really, this is like trying to describe these things that are quite similar but yet different. It's been an intriguing review of both of these, I think, for the price. Very, very good. If I was to go for one, I'd think the Japanese Smooth Whiskey wins it for me. But what do you think? Have you tried either one or the other? And what's your preference? And what do you think about blended Scotch whiskies as a concept? I'm quite liking some of the blended whiskies that I've had of late. This has been a very, very interesting and good value for money review. And on that very pleasing note, and I think I'll finish off on the Japanese Smooth Whiskey. You take care and cheers.